and we can give it a higher priority just to put it at the top of the list. This list has also tested every Excel formula that exists to be able to condense and break it down and list it the way that we have them. So that's a quick overview of what this is. We have, and Jeff and some of the other administrators have the capital book that has a narration or a narrative of every building, new, the square footage, the roof types, the boilers, that everything that's in there. And we update that every year after the projects are completed. It updates the book and on we go. So we were asked this year to do a 6-year plan. Typically it's a 3 because who knows what pops up in those 3 years and what budgetary things happen. So I believe, and Dr. Bolton, if you want to, or Sean want to mention, this 6-year got us to our debt service drop-off.
So I asked to have a 6-year plan created to bridge us to the gap of when the debt drop. There's going to be a significant debt drop of $6 million, and then the following year is like $4 million, and then it drops off eventually to 12 or 13 over a couple of years. And so I wanted us to look at our capital projects with a long-term plan and determine whether or not we needed to keep adding money to the capital projects fund, or whether it was already sufficiently funded to get us to that point, because obviously dropping $6 million per year in 1 year is a big difference. And so are there some things that maybe it would make more sense to wait until then as opposed to doing it now versus the things that are more important to do now? And so we took it was a $9 million number, what we had in capital projects at the time. Since then it's increased to 12, but we were still running on the $9 million number for the 6-year plan to see if that's for those 6 years to get us where we need to be, and making sure that we're maintaining everything properly. And in our discussions, I think I think it worked out really well. We were even able to put some additional things that we thought would be important take out some things that weren't important, and some things that were maybe more cosmetic in nature. And so there's nothing that we're taking out that would have any kind of a negative impact on the maintenance, but now we're able to see that it's enough money to be able to get us there, so we can plan for this period of time. So I appreciate you guys doing that, and I thought it was a good process of us going through and looking at everything, and we have some nice things we're also putting in there in these 6 years that I think would be helpful and people will appreciate. So
again, over the years, Mike and I are constant discussing each other with what's going on. We have the plan, but things can come out, and discuss with Mike, maybe in 2020, we need to put that in. So instead of doing a large feasibility study of the district right now, which would cost a lot of money, we worked off our knowledge. I have the knowledge of the schools, Mike's got the knowledge of the schools. We reached out a little bit, so these are still the priorities that we feel are necessary at the time.
All right, that being said, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Megan. I just wanted everyone to realize why we were doing a 6-year instead of a 3-year. So 2019 is one of the, we would be asking for approval. Let's go to the board meeting to be voted on. And the list that we have on here, we have more paving for next year. We got a lot done this year, but we have a lot more to do. Some sidewalk replacements. We have some flooring to be done, masonry repairs. An alarm system at Siler was one of the ones that just came on not that long ago. It's an older system. It's also obsolete, so it's not that it doesn't work, but it's one of those, if it goes, we're without an alarm, so we're trying to plan ahead for that. So one of the things on the 19 list that wasn't before, and I'm sure there will be discussion about this later, is the air conditioning for the elementary schools, large spaces only.
So that will be a separate discussion.
Mike, can I just pause you for a second?
Yes.
I just want to give the three lenses as the board members are listening to this plan that I would encourage you to think through as you're hearing this information tonight. The time-sensitive items are the things in 2019 that are marked with a year. For those of you who have looked at the document, you can see that the last item in the 2019 plan talks about elementary schools, air conditioning, large space only. There's no year there. We put it there as a placeholder so that we could have a conversation regarding the concept, and Mike will get into that piece. The items above that, which really, if you remove that $1 million placeholder that's there, gets us to about $3.12 million, which is the amount that was budgeted for capital projects for the summer of 2019. So that has been the plan in place prior to me. These were items that you would have discussed a year ago as you were planning the summer of 18 that we're sitting in, as well as the following year. You need that list to be pretty concise because those are the plans that, with board permission, will go in front of the board on Monday night so that we can start the planning and the bidding process for those items so that we can be ready in the spring and summer of 2019 to complete them. So that's the one list, and that's the most time-sensitive list. There then is the elementary air conditioning, which we're going to encourage a conversation around that concept and talk about the price tag and those types of things and see whether the board is willing to continue that conversation or whether we're going to do something different at this point. The rest of the list, the other 6 years that are there, the 20 through 2025, are then those discussion items that have been planned. I can tell you as someone who has walked into this process that even during my interview process and doing my homework on Pennridge, this was one area that was most impressive in terms of a huge thank you to the board, the operations department, the business department, in terms of planning for this type of upkeep on the buildings. That the items that are on this list are extensive, but they also are not screaming emergencies. And it is a wonderful, wonderful tribute to the work that has been done in this district for many, many years to keep that this way. And so I just have to tell you and echo what Ms. Bennis-Clemens said in terms of just the impression that I've had around the process, as well as the forethoughts around priorities and the knowledge of the district, has just been really, really impressive. And I've just been really appreciative of the people who've been involved in that. You're welcome.
So I guess a good segue to thank Jeff for his years of putting his hard work into this plan, because this approval will be the last one that we do with him. So thank you for all your hard work over the years. It was really a pleasure working with you.
And the new candidate's going to be handed almost, the golden fleece, a district. Really.
I was going to say, you can retire now that you're finished everything, right?
There's nothing left, so.
Okay.
If we want to build a new school, I might stay, but since we're not, no, I thank you. And it's been a privilege working with Dewey, and I think Mike probably has the count, but we've probably done over 100 projects, and I don't even know how many millions. Very successful, on time. Renovating a elementary school in
57 days.
57 working days. Roof, windows, boilers, every classroom empty, in the gym, and back in, and we did that, 4 years in a row? Again, Megan, you remember the roofs? I don't, this morning's rain?
Yes.
Last week's rain, that would put me in a heart attack 8 years ago. Didn't even think about it today.
When I first got on the board and he was sharing his book of all of this stuff, the topic came up that when I was in elementary school, we used to put buckets on the desk to collect the water that was leaking in the classroom. So, we haven't. Can you imagine that now with parents? If your kid came home, it's leaking from the ceiling. We're collecting the water.
It gives me fun, yeah. I walked into, I think it was Bedminster, and kindergartens had them all placed around, and there were the buckets, and they just acted like it's okay, and I'm like,
I have no bucket stickers.
So,
I hand out.
I think by the time we're done with this plan, I think all of our roofs will be under warranty.
30+ years, some of them.
You know?
No, you didn't have it on.
Oh.
It's okay. We can all hear you.
I thought that.
Okay, so we have, as Dr. Bolton said, we have 2019 is a carryover from the 16, 17, 18 list. That one was always, none of those have changed except for the conversation we'll get into about the air conditioning, all the way to 25. We don't have to go through item by item. You can look at the priorities, you can look at some of the schools and what they are. And as we go through, come back next year and ask you for the next list, those will be the discussions. Some things may change in the meantime, something might come up if a boiler goes down or what have you. The list, it's a living document. It gets updated every year, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. It depends on what the situation is. But I assure you that the conditions of any of these items are not getting better with age. So if it's on the list, it's on there for a reason. So what we were talking about was the 2019 project list, respectfully asking the board to approve at the next board meeting to get started on that process. And what we typically do, just for your information, we do our surveys early, we do our documentations over the winter, and we are out the door 1st January with bidders. We usually get great response from contractors. We get our best prices then, our paperwork and our shop drawings and everything is ready to go. When the kids walk out the door, we're walking in behind them. So that's kind of our strategy for being first on the street. Now, some of the bigger projects, like the air conditioning, that's going to be a much more involved process in the information up front. We have to do systems analysis and we have to do cost information, and there's a lot more that goes into that. That might be one that goes out February, March. So, and because they're air conditioning projects, we may be able to take them into the October 15th heat season, because we'll be kind of confined to the mechanical rooms. We'll phase the projects. The building work will get done first, and we'll end up in the boiler rooms and out the door if those projects have to go further than a 57-day renovation project. So we have a lot of options, but there's an awful lot to do if that conversation goes that direction, okay? One of the other items that we wanted to bring to your attention is on the 2020 plan, the last item is athletic field under drains regrade. We have had these on the list for a very long time, and they're finally coming due. Most of the work is behind the high school and middle school, all the tiered athletic fields. They were all surveyed and given their own items and work, scope of work and pricing and all that. The combination of all of them, that's each tier, the baseball fields, the softball fields, the football practice field, all those fields, we have standing water, we have grade issues, we have, some of them don't have much grass because we have a lot of shale here. Those items have put that project at that total, and because it's the amount of land disturbance to do all that work, we will have to go through land development process. Department of Environmental Protection will have to go through the Conservation District. Those processes and approvals take time, and we're bringing it to your attention now the year before because two things. One, we have to start that approval process. Two, I think it would be to our benefit to sit down with our athletic department and have a good conversation about, have the uses of the fields changed since this was done in 2007 or 8? We do have the new stadium, Papa Yoder, the practice field hockey field over at South. Is everything still the same use as it was before? Outside organizations like the Yellow Jackets are using for soccer. Are all those things still in place? Is there anything that we need to take into account that we can reduce the work and the cost? Because we want to focus on Pennridge sports fields first. Practice fields or outside organization things would kind of be a second priority. So that conversation with some of the coaches, Dave Babb, whomever, I think it would be a good idea to get that scope of work kind of more narrowed down as to what we're doing and where we're doing it before we're just going to go up there and drop a blade and scrape dirt and plant we need a little bit more direction. And again, we put a lot of these are placeholder numbers, and we take a square footage or some kind of stab at putting a number together. Our budgets are usually very good, but I think that scope is unclear, and we want to talk about that a little bit more. So for the 2020, I want to bring that up for you guys to, just so you know, it's on the radar. And with that, we'll go back to the air conditioning.
So if I may, so I think what Mike's saying is if we are looking at the athletic fields, and I'm just going to throw a date out, by March of next year, I think we should have this somewhat solid, what we're going to do, because anything over an acre, conservation permit could be 6 months to a year. So if we need to be talking about it seriously in March.
And just to add to that, one of the things we talked about was if we combine a lot of these projects, we can see what combinations of projects get us the best bids from local companies,
Correct.
as well
Correct.
as making sure that we have fields we can use in the process, because it's going to take a couple years until you can actually use the fields when you're regrading them. So all of that's going to be taken into account. But this will put all of our grass fields in working condition, and it's something that needs to be done, and this will be a good way to do that throughout the district.
The priority would be the stormwater, because if the fields stay wet, you can't, even if they're in good shape, you can't use them. So that's one of the things that we'll do, is we'll determine what's the priority field, what's the priority repair, if any, and we'll put a list together. Then we'll update the information and the cost. We'll develop a bid strategy. Do we want to package 1 or 2 of the high school and 1 or 2 of the middle school to do at the same time, or take the whole middle school and move? There's decisions to be made and options that we can look at to get best price and not take the use of the fields away from the kids, because with natural grass, it's 2 growing seasons before you can get back on. So if we do that, we're losing a spring and a fall of whatever sport that is. So where are we moving them to, if we are moving them at all? Are we going to mow a new area of grass and we're going to relocate temporarily? Those are things that we have to get worked out. So again, it's on the radar. We're going to talk about this more, but for 2020, if we don't start that process now, come next year, I'm going to tell you we can't do field projects because we don't have approvals already ongoing. So that's where that's at.
And one of the benefits, it's a lower cost to redo the grass fields, and so we can have more fields available, so more students can participate in sports. So that's one of the advantages too, by being able to do this throughout the district.
Okay. So with that being said, on the 2019 list, we do have the air conditioning projects for the elementary schools. So originally, we were asked to put together air conditioning costs for the entire buildings, and that was a whopping price tag. So we talked about with the committee about doing the large spaces only, which is gymnasiums and multi-purpose rooms. So we kind of whittled our square foot down to those areas, but I'm putting a caveat on this. There's an awful lot of investigation that we need to do before we can tell you what that cost is. Are we going to need supplemental structural steel for these rooftop package units? How much of the existing equipment can we keep? Some of them, it may be as simple as putting a cooling coil in a unit that doesn't have one. Some of those units don't have room for one, and we have to do a whole new unit. Some of those are indoor, some of those are outdoor. Do we have power, adequate power to run this air conditioning system? There's a lot going on. Not only do we have to do the surveys, we have to do some kind of an analysis as of which is the best type. Is it a VAV system, which is basically a 4-pipe box up above the ceiling and it's ducted into the room? Or is it a package unit that sits against the wall and it does heating and cooling? Or is it an Airedale unit that sits in a closet? It's similar to a heat pump. It depends on the building. It depends on the square footage. It depends on
Every school is different. Every school, if we could take a look at grass, there's absolutely no room between the ceiling and the drop ceiling. So a rooftop unit you wouldn't be able to use because you couldn't put ductwork in there. So it'd be a different type of system. So every school is going to be different. West Rock Hill, completely different than Bedminster. Some gyms have a much higher roof, as West Rock Hill does the others. So a lot of investigation is going to have to go on. Again, grass could have plenty of power, solar may not. Even our controls, when we look at the fobs and controls, sometimes we use what we call the points in there. There's so many points per control. Some could be filled where there's another 10,000 alone just to put a Johnson Controls box in to get points to talk to the system. So that information could be there, it could not. So there really does need to be an investigation.
So
The square foot
Right.
number right there.
Right, so based on our conversations, the $1 million is a placeholder. I can't say that I can substantiate that number without doing the surveys, but we were asked to put it on the list, give it some kind of a cost and a priority, and have the board discuss if there's interest in moving forward with these projects. If there is, everything that we just talked about is going to have to start to get the ball rolling. But now that it's on that, it's a potential project for 2019. If the board votes to do that, if that's the case, an approval in August would be fantastic. September is okay. Beyond September, we start to get to, we're running out of time to get the design and be out early to get the good cost, or pricing, I should say, through bidding. So to keep our cycle, the earlier approval is better, but we'll keep you obviously updated with whenever we get our updated costs and what type of systems, and we'll bring that back to the board. And maybe the adjusted cost is something that kills it. Maybe it's nowhere near as bad, and we're going to do that. So this is a loaded item on the list. We're asked to put it on for your discussion. So
why don't we have, since this concept was Dr. Bolton's concept, do you want to give an overview of kind of where you came from?
One question first. So Mike, you said there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get those answers to what type of system, how big, where, et cetera. Do we need additional structural steel? Are you able to complete that survey in, sounds like the next 3 to 4 weeks?
No, not next.
Can you put your mic on, please?
no, we would have to have an approval to go out and do the surveys. We would do under our retainer anyway if the projects were approved. So the surveys isn't a cost. The comparison of the systems would be something that we would have. I don't know what to tell you which one. So yes, there would be, I guess we would call it a feasibility study. It would be minor because by looking at some of these buildings, it automatically eliminates the use of 3 of 4 systems. So automatically we know what it's going to be, but what does that mean? Is it structural steel? Is it power requirements? So yes, we need time to come back with the number, but I guess the conversation is there interest in moving forward with this in order for us to do that?
So I think what Mike's saying is, if you do give them the okay in August board, they give them a good 2 months to do the study. If you go into, October, we probably still have a good 2 months of study and out the bid. But anything after November and then asking them to do the study, you're gonna run into time issues.
No, understood. I was just trying to piece it together with, the bidding cycle that you had spoke about being, January's prime bidding cycle. So I was just trying to piece it together, and that's okay. I understand where you're headed.
As the committee was having a conversation regarding options, there had been some conversation in the district around air conditioning. There had been some numbers put together in terms of what an estimate would be to air condition fully all 7 elementary schools. Part of the conversation that I asked them to have is there a middle option, and should we talk about the middle option? Because obviously the board has the right to say, no, we're not air conditioning anything in the elementary schools, and that's the purpose of having a discussion to see how you plan moving forward. The board could decide to fully air condition the 7 elementary schools, and then the question is, how do you plan for those funds? And there would be work to be done. That obviously wouldn't be done in 2019, but would be a long-range plan. One of the things I asked them to do is to consider providing those 3 large air-conditioned spaces in every school, so that when they talk about the gyms and the libraries and the multi-purpose rooms, the students would have 3 spaces that on those days where it is uncomfortable, that the school could develop a schedule so the students would cycle through those spaces. School wouldn't happen in just the gym and the cafeteria on those days, but there would be an opportunity to provide breaks. There are certain academic endeavors that are more appropriate for those types of spaces than others, so the students might choose to have their reading block there in one of the large spaces, so that there would be time to take a break in between those. And I wanted to get a sense for what kind of dollar amount would be assigned to that. So I don't want to, we keep using the word placeholder because I know that we're frightened that if a real number comes back and it's 30% different from this, everybody's like, well, wait a second. So I understand why Mr. Spatafor is saying the way he did, but I do want to make it clear that there was a formula used to develop that. There were contingencies added on. So this number is not plucked from the sky, but obviously when you start getting on roofs and you start looking at a building, there could be things that we don't know about that could be significant issues that would change the price tag. But in all instances, the board would be able to reconsider those and get that information. So really the purpose of it was to have a conversation at this level, committee, and then the full board if needed, in terms of how do you feel about the concept of air conditioning at the elementary school? How do you feel about giving the permission? We're considering the permission at your board meeting on Monday to be able to say, yes, let's do a little more digging so we can get a better number. Obviously, the sooner we do that, the closer it could be to 2019 if we decide to do that. But it's important to make sure we have the right conversation and we get the determination right and not worry about the fact that it needs to be done on Monday, but I think we ought to have the conversation. So I would open the floor for board members in terms of what they're thinking, your impressions, whether there's other questions that need to be answered at this time.
I'd just like to add that just an estimated cost that, again, big estimate for air conditioning all 7 elementary schools would have been $12 to $13 million. And for air conditioning these large spaces, we're looking at about $1 million. So I think it's important to know the differences in those costs to be able to decide. One thing that's good about doing all these large spaces is we could offer some air-conditioned spaces to all elementary schools at the same time rather than prioritizing certain ones over others, because we would never be able to do this all at one time. And obviously this is something more feasible for us to do right away rather than more of a long-term plan if you are looking at the 12 to 13 million. So I just wanted to share that. And then I actually had one question that I thought of. We do close school sometimes when the heat is excessive. By having these large spaces air conditioned, would we still be able to keep schools open, or would you need everything to be air conditioned for that to happen?
No prudent superintendent will ever use the words never, from the standpoint of saying that we would never be in a situation where heat would cause us to close schools. Obviously, student safety and the situation in those buildings will be the decision we make on those priorities. What I can say to you is, with normal conditions in Pennsylvania that we have around here in terms of what that looks like from a heat index standpoint, separate from a very prolonged heat wave, which makes it worse because then there's the storing of the heat overnight, and those are the storms that are the most problematic when you talk about this issue. I do feel as though, given the relief and working with our elementary principals to make sure the students will be able to go in and out of conditioned spaces, I do believe that it would be far less likely that we would have to cancel school for any reason based on heat at the elementary level.
I just have a quick question, and it's about going back to what you were saying earlier about the different types depending on the building, the different machines and units. I'm not really familiar with all that, but and I don't know if this has been talked about before, but what about like using a geothermal heating and cooling source? Has that been looked into as far as, especially for like these big areas?
Yes and no. That's a very dangerous,
Yeah.
I would ask you to talk to Quakertown about their experience with geothermal systems.
So it's a great idea. It's good for some homeowners. They love them. They're kind of bad for schools after 7 to 10 years when the pumps and the pipes and things, yeah, and like Mike said, talk to Quakertown. They're having big issues with what they did. How long ago? 6 years ago or longer? I don't know. But, and I don't think a geothermal would be the right idea for just large
cooling.
spaces anyway.
If we were doing heating and cooling,
Yeah,
the benefit to the geothermal obviously is
heating also.
you're supplementing with air conditioning, you're supplementing with heat. We're only doing cooling now, so that would probably be a more expensive option since it's limited to just one. We would constantly be supplementing it with cooling. Whereas when you're in the 50 to 55 degrees, which is when the geothermals are optimum, I don't know that that's an option for just us adding cooling to these buildings. If it was a new building and it was a total new system, I think that's an option. On these, we even talked about doing a central chiller plant to feed the whole building. The problem is, I don't know that we have the scale, other than maybe West Rock Hill, because it's a very long, big footprint of a building. But some of them, all the elementary schools have some air conditioning in them now, to some extent. The offices, the nurses' station, the libraries, and probably think the computer labs have air conditioning now. So we're not doing full implementation of the entire building. We're kind of filling in the pieces where it's not. So I don't want to give you misinformation because maybe one of them is a candidate for a central plant, but I don't think if it was a middle school, we did it at South. South has a chiller, we did that. Central has 2 chillers out back that we did. Those schools that size square footage made the most sense to do it that way. The elementary schools are maybe half the size of those, so.
If I remember, we talked about geothermal at Penn South, and the piping would have taken up the size of the football field that's there. So, I mean, that's the type of area needed for a school that big. So again, and the other part of it is, like Mike said, it produces heat too. Well, we already have heat in those spaces, so it's almost like buying a heat pump when you only need an air conditioning unit. But, you know, some places it might be okay.
But wouldn't you, if you had that, it's essentially producing free heat for you to some extent. So you would use your current heat system to supplement the geothermal. I mean, you wouldn't just not use the geothermal if you had it doing that with the heat capacity, right? But I just don't know. To your point, I don't know that it's.
I mean, sure you could, but now you have, you know, why are you buying 2 heaters? Would you do that for your home? You know.
Okay, 2 questions. One's for you and the other's for Mr. Dahlberg. As we air condition these large spaces, is this something that we can, if we decide to expand our footprint of air conditioned space, is it something we can build on potentially, or in 5 years, if we decide to air condition the whole school, are we starting over?
That's an excellent question, and I'm going to try and answer that honestly. Most times, the rooms that we're talking about are self-contained units anyway, because they can be turned on or off over the winter or summer. Someone wanted to rent out Bedminster Gym, we can turn the air conditioner on. We don't have to turn the chiller to do the whole building, to do that one space. The classroom wings would all run off of whatever our plant's going to be. But the large spaces typically is a packaged rooftop unit. So it may not be the most efficient. If we did the whole school at one time, you get the most efficiency out of this. But no, you're not going to do redundant work if the rest of the building got done with either a package unit or a 4-pipe system, if you will.
But to your point, we also get the ability to turn off individual sections or turn them on.
And we are an Energy Star rated district.
Okay.
And when we shut things off, like we can keep those spaces cooled. We can rent them, use them for programs, and still not be running the entire building cooling system. So you have built-in flexibility by just doing the large spaces.
So when I was up at the VOTEC, we had, a rooftop unit that covered 4 classrooms. And then down at COS, they needed one, we put a rooftop on 4 classrooms. And then we added another one, and another one. We finally got the whole building air conditioning, it was okay. 12 years later, when they did the full renovation, obviously they came off, and then a chiller went in, and they did it, say, proper and more efficient. But if we put in a couple, you take an elementary school as small as it is, we put a couple rooftop units on for the large spaces, you really only need 2 or 3 more to finish the classroom space. So once you do that, it may take the chiller out of the evaluation of it. But again, every school's different, so you don't know.
Second question goes to you, Mr. Talbert. Do we have money for this?
I didn't know that's what you were going to ask. So the plan that's put together in front of you, it was a plan, as Megan talked about, was a plan that looked at what we have right now in capital projects and assumed that we didn't put any more money in that. And that plan then stretched us out until when our debt dropped off. Those are, that assumption that we won't put any more money in capital projects is the assumption for this plan. But our reality has been, since I've been here, is that every year we put money into capital projects. And this year we'll, when 17, 18, when we're all said and done, we'll be adding some money to capital projects. So yes, we do have funds. I don't think we had funds to go full scale every building, like we were talking of the other option. That type of a lift would probably need to be done over a multiple year period with the insertion of more capital funds into the kitty per se. But right now, I think we will be fine. And it all depends also on what numbers actually do come back.
When you said it would be 2 or 3 more units to finish the elementary school, how would it compare if you only did the classrooms and didn't do the large spaces, and you did it in reverse order? Because we're talking about rotating them through the big spaces, and what if instead of rotating them through, you kept I guess you'd need more ductwork.
Maybe I misspoke. 2 or 3 units per wing to take care of that. So it's really like 6 more units. So it'd certainly be least expensive to do the large area spaces than all the classrooms.
You're trying to trip me up, I can feel it.
Well, no, you just it surprised me when you said 2 or 3 units, and I was like, oh, wow, if it's really just the same to do the classrooms.
Sorry.
I'm trying to anticipate questions that will be asked by the public, right? Since we're saying these words out loud, there will be some questions, I'm sure, that are asked, ideas that are shared. And so one of the questions that I think we talked about was, what do those schedules look like? How long would the kids be in the conditioned spaces? Would the 5th graders get priority, because they're the biggest and hottest? I don't know from that standpoint. Because if you think about 3 large spaces in 6th grade, some people might do the math and say, well, that just means half the day you could be in a large space. And in an ideal system, I think that might make some sense. And depending on what it looks academically, there may be opportunities for that if your schedule falls perfectly and you have library that day for special, because we're going to continue to provide the academic program for the students. And so in places where I have seen this type of schedule utilized, it comes out to be more like 60 to 90 minutes. It would be the maximum time that you would be outside of the conditioned space, and then you would go into the conditioned space for 30, 45 minutes, depending on whether it's special, might be reading block, so that may be different per grade level depending on what specials you have that day, but to give you a sense for what that would look like. And obviously the adults would make intelligent decisions about when it made sense and what the schedules would look like at the building, but I just want to give you a sense for what a schedule could look like as we rotate, and I'm sure that the building principals would do a great job of making sure that was fair and equitable depending on the day.
Any other comments or questions from board members? So should we get a sense of where everyone stands on this? What, maybe go down the line? Lisa, you can go first.
I'm okay with moving it forward. I'm fine with moving it forward as well.
Yes, as am I.
I am as well.
I also want to make sure that we verbalize as you look at the list for 2019. I mean, Mr. Spatafora did talk about that. I want to make sure that everybody has all their questions answered around that project, because that is the list of things that you will see on the board meeting Monday night. And so I want to make sure you've had an opportunity to read that list. And obviously, if you have a question, before then, or we can ask it Monday night as well. But those are the items that will turn around. And then we'll have to put a motion on the floor for the full board on Monday night to talk about what that study looks like in terms of what the next steps are. Because obviously the board is not allocating $1 million for air conditioning at this point. That is not what you just said. You just said we're going to do a study about what that would look like at the large spaces, and it gives Dewey permission to start digging and getting up on roofs and get some better information so we can get some better pricing and know what's going on.
I would see 3 motions, so please tell me if I'm wrong. First motion would be to approve the list that has the 2019 beside each project. Motion to approve those items to go to bid through Dewey. The second motion, and maybe this is where I'm off base, but a motion to approve Dewey to begin a study of the grass field areas. And then the third would be the motion to approve Dewey to do the study for the air conditioning of the all-purpose areas in the elementary schools. Something to that effect for 3 of those. Is that fair enough? Is that?
And I guess you're going to start talking to coaches and all that too.
Can you turn your mic on,
Yep,
please?
that would be part of that second one, that he would begin that process. So we're really letting them go through 3 different processes.
And to simplify that, the approval for the grass fields is basically we would just do hourly under our retainer. It's going to be meetings with the athletic department, and we have the original study. We can use that kind of as a starting point. I don't see that one. We just want to get some clear direction as to where we're going to go with that project, not so much of what's going to be involved with the air conditioning. So just the approval to meet with those people and we'll come back to the board with what the results are, and then we'll decide then where we're going with that and what direction you're going to give for what fields or for what work we'll do for that 2020 project.
Won't some of that come down to the bidding, though? All right, you'll package it in different ways, and then depending on the bidding of those projects, you'll do it whichever way makes the most financial sense.
I need to know what we're doing first. Then once we know what we're doing, we'll get the approval for it to be approved as a project.
Okay.
Then from there on out, it's the typical retainer services for, it's another capital project. We'll just have to start the approval process a little bit sooner. That we'll have to get approval for the civil portion of that for the approval process, the land development process. So once we have some direction from athletic, we will come back and we will get approval from the board to move forward with the land development portion of that, because that will be an additional fee with Terraform or whoever we're going to use for the civil engineering of that project.
I only have one other question. On our 2019 plan, the Grass Elementary School paving and the Guth Elementary School paving, what makes those so much more expensive than the paving at, say, Seiler and West Rock Hill?
The ones at Grass, if you've been to Grass over the last couple of years, the front bus loop is severely crumbled. We expect for that to be a full depth replacement, meaning we're digging it out, doing a new base, doing new paving, whereas Siler is going to be a mill and overlay. We're not going to go down to stone. We some of that similar this year. So we do our best to calculate what we think, and again, some of that might be because it's unsuitable soil, it might be wet, it could be just thin asphalt. Thin asphalt's the best